Hello. So I wanted to make note of how I understand that this virtual learning is stressful and this fear of the unknown is stressful also. So I wanted to bring an animal in today that often makes people feel a lot more stressed. This is Diana. Diana is my rose hair tarantula. She's been with me for about a year. No, maybe close to 2 years now. There she is. She is fairly docile. She has an attitude once in a while, but she has never bit me, which is great because she has gigantic fangs. She's full-sized. I don't expect she'll get any bigger. She is pink on the top. Sorry, I startled her. She is pink on the top, and her hairs are very long, which is why she looks as fuzzy as she does. Her fangs are underneath the front end there. That is her face down toward the bottom and her abdomen toward the back. She is my beautiful girl. I don't actually know if she's a girl or not. It's difficult to tell with tarantulas, but I just wanted to bring her out for today's super exciting lesson. There she goes. Her little rear end there. These legs are going. I can get her to transfer. There we go. I love her. I think she's awesome. All right, we're gonna let her go back into her carrying cage and she'll go back to her enclosure. Good girl. She was much less nervous this time. I'll be right back. Ow! Jeez. Just kidding. I'm fine. She's fine. So we covered bacteria and viruses already, which has been super helpful because we are dealing with a virus in society right now. So let's go over how our body fights off viruses and bacteria. The human immune system is our defense against disease-causing organisms. We call them pathogens. They also take care of malfunctioning cells and other foreign particles. Malfunctioning cells include cells that maybe are dividing too much or just kind of dying and breaking down. Foreign particles include anything that you may breathe in or stuff that you may accidentally eat. If it's going to cause disease, your body can sometimes knock it out and prevent that entirely. Our first line of defense for our immune system are physical barriers, okay? That's our skin. Our skin is our #1 physical barrier. It forms a shield around us and prevents viruses, bacteria, pathogens from entering our body through our skin. If you have a cut on your skin, however, that can leave you open to potential infection. Mucus, super yummy, lives in our nose and in our mouths and our throats. Mucus helps to trap bacteria and viruses and kind of capsulate them so that they don't infect us. We have little hairs called cilia that sweep the mucus into our throat and down into our stomach, which, as most of us know, is full of acid. Our saliva is another one of those liquids that contain chemicals that break down bacteria, that is full of enzymes. Our stomach acid is very acidic. There are lots of things that go into our stomach acid to make it really difficult for anything to survive in there. And it also obviously breaks down our food, breaks down swallowed bacteria, and destroys potential pathogens. Our stomach also forms a coating along the inside. There's a mucus lining there that prevents the acid from eating through our stomachs. That mucus lining is very, very important for us. Also, don't be like this kid and put your fingers in your mouth, especially right now. It's like a pandemic or something. Our second line of defense is non-specific. That means that it acts this way no matter what the pathogen is, okay? The first thing we'll talk about are white blood cells. These attack invaders that actually get in. So if a pathogen actually gets in the body, meaning you put your hands in your mouth and you get it into your body, your white blood cells will begin to attack them. The white blood cells are normally moving throughout our bodies, kind of like, military operations where they're just scanning the perimeter, making sure nobody's getting in. They will enter the body tissues if there is an invader. If you get a cut on your skin and it maybe gets a little dirt or bacteria, your white blood cells will go to that area to help clean that up. Sorry about the bird. White blood cells also contain certain cells called phagocytes. These are white blood cells that are responsible for eating foreign particles. They do something called phagocytosis, which is like chomp chomp. They like to just encapsulate this foreign body and destroy it. Okay, they have things called lysosomes inside, organelles called lysosomes, that lyse the bacteria and kill them. Thank goodness for those, right? The second non-specific defense, this is again something that happens no matter what the pathogen is called the inflammatory response. You can see on this person's leg here that they've got some sort of little injury and it has turned red around the area. If you've ever had a little cut or bruise, you notice that it'll turn red and it'll sometimes feel warm. That's your inflammatory response. Injured body cells release chemicals called histamines, and that begins the inflammatory response. If you have something like allergies, you'll take something called an antihistamine because it'll slow down this inflammatory response against something that isn't going to kill you. If you are around an area that has pollen and you're allergic to pollen, you'll have an inflammatory response. Your eyes will water, your nose will itch, sometimes you'll swell or get hives. That's because you've released histamines against something that isn't really going to hurt you. Your body just thinks it's going to hurt you. So it's like, we better get rid of this, and it doesn't have to, okay? When this happens, when you have an inflammatory response, your capillaries dilate. That's what turns it red. The temperature rises because that will try to kill whatever the pathogen is with an increased temperature, and your pain receptors will activate. You'll feel pain in this area. The white blood cells are going to move to that infected area like sharks to blood. Our third line of defense are specific. Okay, so we've got our external first line boundaries. These are physical boundaries. Your second line of defense are non-specific. It doesn't matter what the pathogen is. Our third line of defense is specific to the pathogen. Okay, this is when we start to build up something called antibodies. Antibodies will be used as specific soldiers that remember specific diseases. Those pathogens that pass the first and second line of defense, they trigger the production and release of antibodies. Okay, these are proteins that latch onto, damage, clump up together, and slow down these foreign particles. Okay, each antibody, though, binds only to one specific binding site, and we call that an antigen. So take the flu, for example. The influenza virus has antigens on the cell's surface. That antigen says, hi, I'm the flu. And if you've had your flu shot, you have the antibodies that recognize it and say, that's the flu, I know how to kill that. And you're protected against that disease. If you've had chickenpox, I had chickenpox, but most of you probably had the shot, you have antibodies against chickenpox. I believe it's called varicella. That's the name of the virus. So if you come into contact with somebody who has varicella and you maybe brush up against them, it gets into your body's like, we know this one. We know how to kill it. If you've never been exposed, your body's like, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do here. And you get sick from it, okay? But then once that sickness goes away, thankfully, you have antibodies and your body remembers, I know that guy. Immunity, then, is something we build. We build immunity to things. This is a resistance to disease-causing organisms or harmful substances, okay? And we have two different types of immunity. When new particles take longer to identify, a person can remain ill until after the new antibody can be crafted. Old particles are recognized quickly. So if you've been in contact, if you've had chickenpox, and then you come into contact with it again, boom, recognizes it, knows how to kill it. You won't become ill from this again, okay? You're now immune. Active immunity is where you produce the antibodies, okay? You produce them. Your body has been exposed to the antigen in the past through exposure to the actual disease, or from the planned exposure in the form of an antigen that's been killed or weakened. That's your vaccine, okay? So some diseases that you get, you'll only get them one time because your body will remember them next time. The second type of exposure, I gave it away, is a vaccine, okay? This immunity lasts anywhere from, a year to many, many years, depending on the antigen itself. Okay, so for the flu, this changes every season. But we talked before in the virus section that the flu mutates really, really quickly and really, really easily. So from one year to the next, the antigens are slightly different. So if you get infected with the flu again, the antigens are so different, your body doesn't recognize it. It recognizes last year's flu and you won't get that. But this year's, that's a different one. You get a booster shot for some vaccines like tetanus. You get tetanus about every 10 years, but that's because it starts to wear off over time. And your body just starts to slowly forget what tetanus is like. So you get the booster, you're good for another 10 years, unless you come into contact with something rusty. I did a couple years ago and I had to get a new tetanus shot. I hate those, they hurt. But I did it because it's safe. Chickenpox, they seem to think lasts forever. There is some research suggesting that if you've been infected with chickenpox, that you can be open to something called shingles as an adult, as a later adult, but they've developed vaccines for that too that you can get once you're over 50. And that will protect you against shingles. Let's see, with passive immunity, you don't produce the antibodies, okay? Like a mother can pass her immunity to her baby through pregnancy. These antibodies protect the baby for a short period of time following birth that'll allow the immune system to develop on its own. Okay, so this is passed from birth mother to birth child. The antibodies will die, unfortunately, which is okay because the baby will start to become exposed to pathogens in the wild naturally, and they will develop their own immunity and their own immune system, both naturally and through vaccines as the timeline progresses. All right, let's see. Viruses are going to enter the body cells, hijack the organelles. We've talked about viruses already. They turn it into a virus-making factory. This is a pretty cool graphic, actually. This is before infection, and then in this cell, you can see it's full of viruses that it replicated inside that host cell. This one's in here. This is a big deal. If you think that the flu is no big deal, again, in 1918, a particularly deadly strain of flu, we called it the Spanish influenza, even though it did not originate in Spain. It originated elsewhere. However, at the time, Spanish news channels did not censor their news, and so people talked about it big time in Spain, and it became known as the Spanish flu. It didn't originate there. Let's see, it spread across the globe. That was a global pandemic, kind of like what we're dealing with now, where it reaches the whole world. That's what a pandemic is. It infected about 20% of the human population and killed about 5%, which came out to be about 100 million people. That is a big deal. That was a very, very serious illness and actually contributed to changing the way war happened during that time. Next, this one's very important, actually, because the acquired immune deficiency syndrome is the result of a decreased immune system. So this is caused by the human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV. It was discovered in the early 80s, and it specifically targets and kills something called T cells, and these are part of your immune system's cells. There are lots of different types of immune cells, but T cells are one of them. Because your normal body cells aren't affected, the immune response doesn't happen. So your body doesn't even recognize that you have this, because the immune cells themselves, the ones that would be fighting off the bad guys, are actually infected by the bad guys. AIDS is considered to be the modern plague because it doesn't actually kill its victims. It just cripples the immune system, which is super unfortunate because humans end up dying then of extremely preventable diseases that normally wouldn't kill anybody at all. Their bodies could fight them off under normal circumstances, but because this disease just wipes out your immune system completely, they're unable to fight off anything else. This disease can show no effect for a very long time, and that can make it even more of a dangerous and deadly disease. AIDS spreads almost silently. It's transmitted through sexual contact, blood transfusions, and contaminated needles that people use for IV drugs. As of about 2007, which this is old data by now, it affected 33 million people, and the numbers are likely higher today.